All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Aligned, Liberated, and Abundant. I am Dr. Toya Davis, and I am so happy to be here taking space and sharing space with you again today. Today, we have a guest, but before we get to our guest, just going to let you know if you're in the right place, right? So, here at Aligned, Liberated, and Abundant, I am really interested in talking to you if you consider yourself to be a high achieving woman or overachieving woman, whichever word you want to use, right? You've done all of the things. You've reached the pinnacle of education, right? You've gotten the accolades, the titles, the salary feels comfortable, but yet and still you recognize that there is still something more. That more could be alignment, feeling like you're not in your purpose, feeling like you have a cap in your finances, feeling like your relationships are not where they need to be. Whatever it is, you know that there's more. This is where we hold space for that. So I am happy today to have our guest, Kimberly, who I met doing a podcast. Ironically, right? We hadn't met ever before. We just were two guests on the same podcast dealing with grief, hosted by a guy named Tony Lynch, and I'll drop that in the show notes if you all want to check out that episode as well. And we were talking about ancestors, and we just kept talking, and as things, I was like, look, it's a kindred spirit, right? And I was really excited when she said that she would come and join us on the show. So I'm actually going to turn it over to her so that she can give a proper introduction of herself and tell you all of the things before we kind of dive into where we're going today. Thank you, Kimberly, for joining me today.
Of course, Latoya, it's so good to be with you. I love that story about how we met. Um, it's super aligned with who we are both just being in the world, knowing that the rendezvous points are already predestined and we just need to have done the work to arrive at the sanction point at the right time. So let me just introduce myself. It's so funny. I hardly ever know what exactly to say. So it's because there is always this sense of more and more and more that lives in my spirit. So I love that that's how you even welcome people into this space. I'll simply say for now that I'm Kimberly Imfezi in Ngonyama. I haven't always been. I was Kimberly Basket. I was Kimberly McEnany. I was Kimberly Gunter. Which I think also speaks to the transformative nature of life itself and how the ancestors move through us. And so I am a ancestral student of life. I am a alchemist. I'm a mambo. I'm a sangoma. I'm a mother. I'm so many things. What I be in the world for a living as my vocation is I'm a leadership strategist and trusted advisor to coaches who are leaders who are on a mission. Those of us who understand that leadership is a sacred calling. That's kind of the world that I love the most and the waters that I love to swim in the deepest. And I'm delighted to be here with you. So thanks again for the invitation.
You're very welcome. Yeah. When people ask me to introduce myself, I always start with it depends, and then, well, what? I'm like, it depends on the day, right? Let's see what's on top today. Right.
Mhm.
Let's see what's
Right.
coming up on top today. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. One of the things that was interesting in kind of what you talked about, I think, and audience, forgive me, things start to merge together for me. But I think it was in maybe episode like 5 or 6 where I was talking about these meeting points, right? How do you know? We talk about alignment. One of the things that I talk about a lot is
Mhm.
alignment, right? And so, how do you know when you're in alignment? What does that look like? And I'm like, sometimes it's not a straight path. There are things that we deviate, there's wobbles, there's waves, but there are these set kind of points along the
Mhm.
way that lets you know, wait, I hit this thing. This is a marker. Yes. Good. We're good. Right. Now we're going to try. Some other things might come and like, wait, what's happening? We're back in the wave again. But then you reach that marker again. And so I definitely believe that we have what I call set points, right? Set
Mhm.
points along our journey, which serve as confirmation to let us know that we are on the right path. We are doing the right thing, right? It can be smaller, it can be big, but it's just there to give that moment of like, yes, sometimes
Mhm.
we need that extra push to kind of move on. So yes, I acknowledge that kind of serendipity of our meeting. You talk about, I wanted the leadership, you working with people or working with those women? Do you work primarily with women, or is it both?
No, no. Yeah, it's a very diverse group. My clients are, what they have in common is not their gender, but their devotion to, I'm here to do something significant and something from a humanitarian perspective. So most of my clients are, I would say actually all of my clients are legacy builders, and they are very willing to do things in a way that goes against the grain. They are, in the industry terms, we would call them mavericks. They
Mm-hmm.
are, yeah, the trailblazers. They are operating at the tip of the spear. What I say about my clients is they've often been so far ahead that for many years they felt like they were behind. And so they're building, they have 100-year missions in their spirit. And so yeah, it's not gender specific. It's more about who you agreed to be at the baseline. They are all aligned with true sovereignty,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
absolute
Mm-hmm.
true sovereignty and freedom in this lifetime, and creating it for others as well. That's kind of that's a requirement. You can't just be about what you want to, all about yourself. In my
Mm-hmm.
community, it really has to be about doing something for the greater good.
So this notion of true sovereignty, I'm team sovereignty. What does
Yeah.
that look like, and how do you express that in words, right? What is that?
Yeah.
How does that translate?
Yeah, thank you for that, because that the word gets, it's kind of trending, which is disruptive to my spirit in a lot of ways. Um, for me, true sovereignty means a deep understanding of the metaphysics of why you are here, your connection with the ancestors. It is having a curious spirit about, how do I apply ancient technology, ancient wisdom, and be the bridge, and allow it to be the bridge between this realm that we think we're living in the multidimensional realms, to innovate and to create something new that's going to actually progress humanity forward, both with for yourself, as well as, again, for all of the collective. It, to me, sovereignty also is a long, long game. We do not die. We do not
Yeah.
die. And
Yes.
so sovereignty is about, how am I conducting myself? What are the specific things that I can do so that when I make my transition out of this experience, I'm actually setting myself up and my bloodline and humanity for the next turn of the spiral, so that we come in more divine than we left, because
Mm.
that's the game we're all actually playing. Sovereignty is not about necessarily, being able to manifest a car or financial freedom. That's a part of it. That's
Mhm.
that's that's as we talked about, those are some of the markers,
Mhm.
because that means that you have created the ability within yourself to align with your desires. But that's not the ultimate goal of sovereignty. The ultimate goal is to get out of this thing alive.
I love that. I love that. And so for me, and we both do work in the Akashic records, right?
Mhm,
So that was kind of, again, one of, I was like, oh, look, another person. And I always say, when I'm talking to people, one of the underlying things that you really have to believe is that you are an eternal spirit, right?
mhm,
That your time right here in this 3D body is simply this time in this 3D body.
mhm.
But it goes back, it goes forward, right? There's a continuation. And with, like, out that understanding and without grasping it, everything else is just really semantics, right? Everything else is just piling stuff on top, right? Because that really is the core. And I love that you said, kind of the goal is to get out of here alive, because I haven't thought about, although I do intentionally do work again, if you're listening to me on the podcast, you don't see my air quotes, right? But I do intentionally do work that is about elevating myself in the next iteration of this cycle. But I've
Mhm.
never consciously thought about that whole idea of, yes, I'm elevating and what that divinity looks like the next time. It's like,
Mhm.
it's an unconscious thought. Now that I'm talking, I'm like, it's an unconscious thought because you're doing the work for elevation. But I love
Mhm.
how you said that, right? Getting out of here alive is just a really, I'm going to have to sit with that. I like it.
Yeah.
Thank
Uh,
you.
I love that. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to go to this. How did you get called into this work? Because I know you came out of kind of a corporate, space and landscape. So how do we go from that to where we are today?
Yeah. What's the arc of that transformation? First of all, I guess it's important to say that I'm a Scorpio. So we are all about, the life and death and regeneration process. Um, which is why I kind of jokingly, but seriously, just rattle off all the names because those are all kind of different versions of who I've been, like the many lifetimes that I've already lived in this chronological age. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, just really fast. I went into corporate America to avenge my father. That's just the truth. Just the bottom line. Just cut to it. At some point, I'm a romantic. I wanted to be a romance writer, and um, my mom, when I went to college, was like, "Okay, no, that's no. You need to do something that's going to pay the bills." Now, if the version of me now would have said to my mother, "Okay, but you spend hundreds of dollars on romance novels. I see all the books that are stacked up in this house, but I didn't have the wherewithal to say that."
Right.
And so instead, I just said, "Okay, mom." Um, and so I go to school, I do all that, I get the degrees that, are going to please my people. And then I come out and I'm like, okay, I'm going to work a nonprofit. And what's funny about that is I'm sitting at the public library here in Kansas City, a block away from where this story began,
Mm.
which the irony of that is kind of funny. And so I I take this job. It's awful. Uh, I'm underpaid. My boss is mean to me. It's just this classic story. This is already the ancestors are like, get out. And I'm like, no, I got to do this because my mom told me to, be responsible.
Yes.
And back then, my mother was the ultimate authority in my life.
Hmm.
I had outsourced all of my power and authority to my mother at that point. And so my parents are mostly proud of me, but they're also afraid for my long-term, financial health.
Hmm.
And because I'm working a nonprofit and they don't like it. That's not their vision for my life. So my father's working for what was in Southwestern Bell. And and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to work where my dad works. That is ridiculous. That is his company. I had all of these ideas about what it meant to work in corporate America. I still had
Hmm.
this rebellious spirit. Um, but then one day my mom tells me the story about, in her interpretation, people are being mean to my dad. And I was like, the hell? You're not going to be, not on my watch, because I had, um, spirit will always give you the indication of who you are to become.
Yes.
And the the warrior in me was awakening. I didn't have a name for her. These warrior ancestors were starting to perk up. I didn't have
Hmm.
names for them back then. All I heard was, someone's being mean to Lloyd. That's my dad. We're not doing that here. That's
Yes.
all I knew back then. I
Yes.
didn't have the all this language
Hmm.
that I have today. So I go into corporate America I sail in there, I'm going to avenge my father and I'm going to get out. That's the plan. Get in there, do the thing, get out. No, she's in there 20 years.
Wow.
It was very beautiful. Ultimately, and you've heard this story before, but for the sake of this podcast, I get fired because Spirit's like, you were supposed to get in and get out. That's no, you're supposed to learn what you came to learn and go. But the perks were good. I hung in there a really long time. And I actually loved it too. I learned a lot about who I am as a leader, and there's lots of ways that God will support you and use you, and the ancestors will work with whatever situation you're in. And so it really turned out to be quite beautiful. And I met some of the most astounding people and really honed my leadership strategy skills and fell in love with leadership in that role. And then it really was time for me to go. I stayed a little bit longer than Spirit really wanted me to hang out there.
Most of us.
Most of us. And the reason I think that happens for most of us is because we don't have this language and these practices yet around sovereignty. There wasn't a Toya Davis, hanging out at the water cooler to say, girl, come this way. You're not supposed to be in here right now. There wasn't a Kimberly, Imfezi, and Ngonyama to say, your work here is done. This cycle has ended. And so I entered another cycle and looped a little bit longer, which is the, kind of the longer answer to your beautiful question. I became this because I looped a little bit. And I was always meant to be this. What you're seeing right now is the fulfillment of my destiny. The work that I did in corporate America was the, kind of the training ground and the proofing ground for who I was to become. And so because the ancestors are everywhere, they just met me there and they were like, you know what, this way over here. And I just kept bumping into walls for a minute and they were like, oh, here's the exit. And I had a moment toward the tail end of that career. I was getting divorced from my daughter's dad. It was terrible. I think we've talked about this before, but it was a really difficult part of my assignment. And I remember saying to God, take it all, take everything, but leave me my daughter, because there was like a custody battle. It was just ridiculous. And also necessary in many ways, because it really sharpened, laser focused me on my values and what really mattered and who I say I am in the world. And, for the sake of, being respectful, I won't cuss on your show, but I will say I had a moment where I was like, there are so many things that we are not going to allow anymore. And that awakening in me then set me on a new trajectory. Where, a few years later, because I had to lay new foundations, I came out of that corporate experience and realized my destiny. And then it's just been the work ever since. So then it's been, getting on coming back to accept that one of the roles that I agreed to take on is this ancestor and the archetype of healer and in my family and in my bloodline. And for the sake of my clients, like I really, Margaret, that's my mother, is still sometimes like, okay, this is what she's doing, She does give me like the jaundiced eye sometimes, like, okay. But even that's a part of this work. It's very beautiful. And what we get to realize is for those of us who do understand that leadership is a sacred calling, we're going to do it differently. And there will be those who love us very much who don't understand why we're doing it the way we're doing it. But when we're called to be innovators, like you are, like many of the women who are listening, we do we realize that part of that responsibility means we get to love the people we love in a way that from an unconditional space. Like I love my mother unconditionally. She doesn't need to understand me for me to love her. In fact, the less she understands me, the more I love her.
Yes. And I think I'm going to add to that place of loving someone unconditionally, or that place of loving someone, and this goes back to that empowerment and sovereignty idea, right? But that place of loving someone from that space means that you don't have to sacrifice who you were meant to be, right? And what happens a lot of times, and how we end up giving that power away, is the conditioning, right? It's not, I'm not, oh, you shouldn't do this, right? It is literally the way society has set it up, particularly for women, right? We are conditioned and taught to buy into this idea that in order to appear, because it is an appearance, right? When I'm trading my happiness for your happiness, it is the appearance of love, because now I'm saying I love you more than I love me, which is essentially what's happening. And I'm willing, and I'm okay with that. And for me, it's like, no, I can love you and I can love me, right? I can love you, but I'm going to love me at this higher level, which allows me to love you in a way that still lets me honor myself. And I think, you saying your mom gives you I love the John Desai, right? Your mom gives you that I at this point. She's like, no, I love you. I don't understand it. I don't need to understand it. And you're like, I'm strong enough in who I am at this point that I don't need to give in, right? I don't need to feel like I have to bring myself small so that I can still receive love on this other side.
That's right. Yeah, that's beautifully said. As you're speaking, I'm seeing this image of what we know as the sacrificial lamb. This could be a whole sermon in and of itself, but so for today, what I'll say is, walking this path means I have passed the initiation of Christianity for me, because that's the way I came in, because that's the program that my family was running, and that in terms of how do we relate to God, how do we relate to divinity, we were running the Christian program for many years. Before that, we're running the program that I am now back to, which is the program of Vodou and the Sangoma program, which is why my mother's like, I'm not sure which these programs seem to be in conflict. No, Mom, I promise you, this is all the same program, because it all goes back to source.
Yes.
But this idea of sacrificing ourselves for the sake of appearing to be in alignment, for the sake of appearing to be a safe space for people, for the sake of appearing to be loving, for the sake of appearing to be kind. I think, in fact, I know that some of that comes from this idea, these Christian ideas that no longer are part of my program, so I can see them a little bit differently without negative judgment, by the way. But of course, and who was Christ? Christ was the lamb, so, and then what do we do with lambs? We sacrifice them. This is why we have this language. Well, I just have simply stopped running the program of sacrificial lamb, and I'm now running a program of Christ consciousness, which is also the program of the ancestors and the connection that the ancestors had, that kind of direct connection that my ancestors had with the divine, with the supreme being, which is actually the Christos consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's just a matter of which part of that program are you aligned with. Because I am completely in alignment with becoming a sovereign being, I just no longer even get to run the program of sacrificial lamb. I don't get to play that role anymore. And
Yes.
and also, because I'm running the program of Christ consciousness, I don't get to have a negative judgment about people who are running the program of sacrificial lamb. I just realize, oh, that's the program you're running. That's fine. I love you. I honor that program in you. I see that in you. I recognize that program. I've run that program before. I've graduated from that program. We're all just doing whatever we're doing. But I've just set new terms and conditions for my relationships with my first with myself, with the
Mm-hmm.
ancestors, and then that just sort of stipulates all the other relationships.
Yes. I think that it is, it can be difficult for someone witnessing someone running the program of I call it detachment, right?
Mm-hmm.
This notion that I'm not really attached to your circumstance or your reaction to the circumstance. It's like, oh, okay, that's where you are. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Let how can I support you in that space? But it's not judgment, right? I was there, we were there, or maybe I wasn't there, but that because it wasn't a part of my path.
Yeah.
But it can be read as non-caring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can be perceived or received as you being cold or hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, then the other program kicks back in of, oh wait, no, no one, you can't see me like that. So now how can I adjust and shift to kind of get back in the space where you don't perceive that to be my character or my nature? And I
Mm-hmm.
think bringing these things up are really important, particularly for those of us who are in the space, or those listeners who are in the space where it's like, I feel like I'm like this shift is happening. I don't quite understand what's going on, right? And then you default. So
Yeah.
understanding that what's happening is the larger cosmos or the majority of people are in a program
Mm-hmm.
um, that is not necessarily in alignment or in agreement with kind of that Christ consciousness ideology,
Yeah.
right? And so when you start to tap into that, it's okay that you're going to look and feel differently, and allow yourself the space to explore that. And at a point, the looking and feeling differently doesn't impact you the same way because
Yeah.
you've become so in tuned, and however you find that attune, like you've become so tapped into that main line, right? That it allows you to see other people's humanity differently,
Mm-hmm.
which then allows you to experience your own humanity differently, right? So stay the
Yeah.
course.
Stay the course. Yeah. It's this creator. Um, it's this the creator mindset. This um, operating at this space of divine detachment of I really, Latoya, one of the most insidious programs in this realm, in this 3D realm, is the program of duality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And duality uh, rears its ugly head in a lot of different ways. You're feminine, you're masculine, it's very linear, it's very binary. And one of the things that I love about how things are shifting in the collective is how so many beings now have been born or are awakening to their non-binary truth,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
whether that's showing up as our sexuality or our mindset. I would say you have a non-dualistic, non-binary mindset, which is the mindset of sovereignty, which is
Mm-hmm.
the mindset of wholeness, the mindset of unity consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So this um, the idea of divine detachment stems from that mindset. of, there's really no pure good and there's no pure negative. Things simply are. And so what you're speaking to is this capacity to see things the way divine mind sees things, to have this divine perspective, this long-term perspective of ultimately, as whatever behavior is being played out, whatever mindset's being played out, whatever terms and conditions, whatever programming you're operating in, ultimately that path is going to lead you back to yourself, and you're going to realize that you are made of God stuff, that your divine spark is as bright, as vibrant as any other. Now, where you are in your path, based on past lifetimes, based on what you're doing now, that determines your trajectory. But I'm not here to judge it. I'm here to witness it.
Right.
I'm here to observe it. And also to hold space for it as an ancestor and a descendant, as my own being, becoming the divine being that I am here to become, to witness you as a supreme being that you really already are. You may just not know it yet.
Yes.
And so for the women who are walking this path, as you say, stay the course, wherever you are in the path is perfect. I know sometimes that's hard to hear. When people used to say that to me, I'd be like, oh my God, if I hear that one more time, it feels less than perfect some days.
Yes.
It feels onerous some days. But that is also once you get to what you've achieved, which is this detachment within yourself, you can see it as perfect because it's releasing this, oh, it has to be good or it has to be bad, and coming to this third rail or this neutral point is what allows you to cut through the water with more ease.
Yes. Yes. I think one of the questions that a popular question, let me put it like that. A popular question is kind of, what's my purpose, right? People are always, what's my purpose? And I am always backpedaling from that question because one, I believe words have inferred meaning, right? So it's the purpose. When someone says purpose, it takes the onus, or it takes the connotation of what society has believed purpose to be. And purpose has been associated with job, right? When someone says, what's my purpose? They're like, what am I supposed to be doing? Right? Not necessarily my role, right? My role to help elevate or to cultivate this or this, but it's like, what is the job that I am supposed to have? And that is the purpose. And I bring this up because you mentioned this idea of destiny and path. And for me, I like to think about the purpose, right, is more the destiny. And the destiny is just like that end thing. How you get to it is choice, right? It is absolutely choice. It is, I can be doing my purpose, or I can be doing the thing that I was called here to do by talking to you all today, and holding interviews, or I can be in the soup kitchen somewhere talking to, people that are coming in and helping them in that capacity. So for me, it's like not the thing, it's the how you show up and hold space for whatever that purpose is. And so I just wanted to, when you said destiny the first time and we talked about path, so I always think of it like, I can get to New York. If I'm going to New York, I can walk there, I can fly there, I could take a boat, I can go around the Atlantic, I can go around the Pacific and come back, as long as I'm working to get to New York, right? Some paths are going to be bumpy. Some paths are going to take me a little bit longer, right? I'm going to meet some colorful people on some of the paths, but this notion that who we are designed and destined to be is there, right? It is in us. We don't have to do anything to bring that as a part of our being. It is a part of our being. And
Mm-hmm.
as long as we are open to kind of being on the journey and on the path with the intention of, I'm trying to get to this divine space or this calling or whatever this is,
Yeah.
we don't have to hold on so tightly or be so afraid of picking the wrong thing, right? Or trying to find
Mm-hmm.
that perfect path, because all of the tools, we need all of the tools along the way. That was
Yeah.
my long story to, yeah.
Yeah. uh, yeah, I totally agree with you that your job, there's we conflate in this society,
Complete
especially in the Western
sensibility. Yeah.
culture, job with purpose
Yes.
and destiny. I do
Yes.
make the distinction. I also make a distinction between destiny and fate, which job and fate may actually be more aligned than
Hmm.
most
Hmm.
people realize. Um, because your fate is, uh, I equate fate to, if I outsource my power, or if I continue to be in agreement, if I had continued to be in agreement with letting forces outside of me run my life
Hmm.
or inform or influence me. For example, if I had stayed in corporate America, I would have been still moving with a sense of purpose. I simply would have been operating in fate, different than the fact that I am with you now as Kimberly
Hmm.
and Fezi and Ngonyama,
Hmm.
fully fulfilling my destiny. It's a different path, to your
Hmm.
point. All
Hmm.
roads ultimately lead.
Hmm.
However, because I'm in devotion to truly being sovereign in this lifetime,
Hmm.
there are specific agreements that have to be made now that I've agreed to be sovereign. One
Hmm.
of the things I say is the most important question we can ever ask ourselves is, am I willing to do whatever it takes to become the highest version of myself? If the answer to that question is yes, then you put yourself on a specific path of your destiny. So oftentimes, then what happens when you say yes to that question
Hmm.
is there's a lot of unbecoming that has to happen. I had to unbecome the version of myself who was not walking
Hmm.
that path. I
Hmm.
had to
Hmm.
unbecome and relinquish some roles that I thought were the most important roles to me. In fact, all the roles. Now, when I introduce myself, I say I'm a mother, and anyone who follows my social media life knows that one of the best things that's ever happened to me is I became a mom. And I'm super good at it because I'm very conscientious about how I'm momming this
Hmm. Hmm.
descendant into the world. Um, but I've also had to work to relinquish that as my identity.
Yes.
That's a role, but it's not my identity. It's
Yes.
not my ultimate destiny.
Hmm. Hmm.
So making these subtle and sometimes not so subtle distinctions is very important because yes, I can get to New York, as you say, many, many different ways. I want to get to New York the most enjoyable way. I don't want
Hmm.
to walk to New York.
Yes, I agree.
I want to
Yes.
get to New York and enjoy myself. I want
Hmm.
to get to the whatever's happening after this lifetime and
Hmm.
fully
Hmm.
enjoy myself. I
Hmm.
want to, I want to plan that trip.
Hmm.
When I
Hmm.
leave this body, when I leave this version of Kimberly and go on to the next, I want to have booked myself some really exciting experiences on this other side of this experience.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
is how we become the masters of our own fate or our own destiny. I'm the captain of this ship,
Yes.
this mothership.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm running this mother, which means I'm responsible for making some very deliberate decisions about how I'm going to show up and how I'm not going to show up.
Yes, I completely agree. And I just this notion of being deliberate. So two
Mm-hmm.
things. Tools, right? So the work that the being the Sangoma,
Mm-hmm.
working with the ancestors, right? These are tools. I don't want to, redact it or redact these energies to that, but it is a way to help direct that path, right? Or to
Mm-hmm.
to receive information and to help kind of take you from walking, right?
Yeah.
From the walking version to get to New York to being like, wait, no, but if you went this way, right, that's a little clearer. Or if we,
Mm-hmm.
cut this through or did this is a little clearer. But for me, one of the things that's important is the question you asked. So someone asked me, well, what happens when we, how do we know that we're in alignment or that we're, and I'm like, you ask yourself or you
Mm-hmm.
give your highest self or the best version of yourself, I say permission to lead, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is being intentional about, I have the desire to connect or be in this way. And then if you do that and then you trust the breadcrumbs, right, as they start to unfold. So now I'm following the breadcrumbs that I've given the highest version of myself permission to show me, and now I'm going to follow it. Then that gets me on that shorter path. And those
Mm-hmm.
breadcrumbs can be through, listening to my ancestors, or it can come in a multitude of ways, but it is intentionally putting yourself in the space to say, I want the shortest and clearest path, right?
Yeah.
I want that and help me get there. So tell the people, I try to keep, we're over. I try to keep my podcast short, but I really do enjoy talking to you and your wisdom and your information. So tell people, as we're talking about kind of these paths and the
Mm-hmm.
different tools, how do you use the various trainings and modalities and
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff? How do you incorporate that to kind of help people?
Yeah, so I believe in a ritualized lifestyle. So the work that I do um, starts with divination. Speaking of, the Sangoma path and the Mambo path, which I am a fully initiated Haitian Vodou Mambo. This is what we look like these days. Um, some of us. Um, which I think is hysterical. It speaks to like what people think of, like,
Yes, yes,
you know, speaking of patterns and expectations.
yes.
So divination is a big part of the work that I do, connecting my clients with their higher selves. That's actually one of the first places that we begin is going into your Akashic records and asking questions so that you can begin to understand who am I really and what is my destiny. One of the things that I have been gifted with as a supernatural power is I can very easily see people's destinies, very different than their purpose, absolutely different than the job that they are currently in. It's one of the things that God has me doing in this lifetime is to be able to help people get redirected to their destinies, because it's so important that we all walk that path in this lifetime. So we start with divination. I have one of my favorite practices right now for my leadership clients is an assessment called the ELI, Energy Leadership Index, which speaks to the 7 levels of energy, shows you very specifically how you're working with your innate energies and the gap, how to bridge the gap between wherever you are today and what you were talking about earlier, which is this divine mind, getting to creator mind in this state of divine detachment. That's one of the most straightforward, kind of boots on the ground, um, also coupled with this spiritual technology that I love to work with. It's a diagnostic tool. It's a spiritual tool that acts like a diagnostic tool. So my leaders really love that. Um, and then, of course, there's always a place to go into the deep, deep, deep work with me, where we work together privately for 13 months at a time.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm interested in the ELI. I
Yeah.
always tell people the artist nature of me, the qualitative, yes, be free, yes, spirit, yes, all of that. And then I'm also like, and give me something concrete. Right.
Loopy's on the ground. We got to get these boots on the ground.
Yes. How can I know that I went from here to here? I need a measurement. Give me something, give me a starting point, give me the next point. Yes. So
Yeah.
I definitely will be talking to you about that. Where can people find you?
Yeah, find me in all the, I'm in all the typical places. I'm on Facebook as myself, Kimberly Imfezi Ngonyama, as well as on Instagram.
Okay. Cool. Well, everyone, I hope that you have enjoyed today's conversation. I have definitely enjoyed it. It is always wonderful when you are able to walking this life or being in this life or doing this work. We find people that you find your tribe, right? And then sometimes you just find it's like, wow, the synchronicities are crazy. And again, those touch points, right? It's like you're not crazy. Right?
Right.
You're not crazy. Look, here's another physical person that is, kind of saying these same things. And so that is always reassuring because sometimes I do be like, wait, did I think that out loud? So I thank y'all for joining us and being a part of our internal conversation, right? Thank you for listening to us have a conversation today. Remember, you deserve to live a life that lights you up from the inside out. And
Mhm.
I am happy to help you achieve that. So until next time, stay aligned, liberated, and abundant. Peace.